Welcome back, everybody. So this video is for a viewer. This viewer asked this question right here. So it's a great question, and this is something that, we see commonly with people that are trying to push conspiracy theories, okay? And I'm not trying to say this to be mean, but we definitely see that people will take, they'll read one section of US federal code and they'll try to make it into something that it's not. So if we're really trying to truly understand what this code is, let's go ahead and go straight to the source. USC 4512, so 4512. Basically, this is the hoarding of designated scarce materials. And this was signed as a federal law under the authority of the president in respect to health and medical resources needed to respond to the spread of COVID-19 within the United States of America, and delegated to the Secretary of Homeland Security. And you can see that under subsection 4 of the ordinance number 13911. That's 13911. And I will give you all the links in the description box below so you can take a look at this stuff for yourself. And basically, the order is to prevent hoarding. No person shall accumulate in excess of reasonable demands of business, personal, or home consumption for the purpose of resale at prices in excess of prevailing market prices, materials which have been designated by the president as scarce materials or materials of supply which would be threatened in such accumulation, right? And so what a lot of people are trying to state, this is basically referring to, disinfectants and PPE. That was the purpose of the law, and it clearly states down below that that's what the purpose of it was. But people see scarce materials, right? Because that is a broad definition, and they are trying to make it out to seem that the government's going to come in and take your food, take your water, take your firearms, take your bullets, take all your preps, right? That's what people really try to make this out to be. And that's just blatantly false, right? That's not true. And we're going to break down why that is. But I think it's important that we actually understand what this law states. So I'm going to make a quick pause right here. I'm going to show you a screenshot so you can see it. And I also want you to, if you have your phone, pull it up on your phone and really do a quick read, and then we'll get into the nuance of it. But I'm going to leave the screenshot here for you, and I encourage you to look it up yourself. So we're going to get over the boring stuff real quick. I think it's important to realize that when you actually look at the subsections of this, of this federal law 4512, I think it's important that we also realize that if this were to happen, and if the president said, hey, there's a lot of people that have PPE and we are wanting to go in and recover this PPE, there's a lot of procedures that have to happen. So as part of the regulation and procedure of the reallocation of resources would go, it would take 60 days after the publication of the date in which the president could start to get even the wheels moving in getting everything planned and set up. He can push it to 30 days after the effective date, but that would be meaning that he would need to have a really good reason to do it, and it would be 30 days that the Senate would be able and have time to talk about the public ramifications. So it's not something that he can just say, hey, we're going to start going door to door and taking all this stuff. No, that wouldn't happen at all. He would basically state, I plan to, there have been lots of face masks that are being hoarded and sold on the internet at 500 times market price, and we want to stop that, so cease and exist. If they chose not to cease and exist, then the government would say, okay, we're in a national pandemic and we're going to go get them if you don't. So then he has 60 days to have Congress meet, right? It says so right in the right in the flow chart there. He has 60 days to be like, all right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go here, grab these masses, how we want to do it. And then the Senate and House of Representatives and Congress can say, well, this is obviously a bad idea, you can't do this, and so both sides are going to be able to speak on it before it even happens. And unless the president has a really good reason, the shortest time frame that he has before he can even start putting things together is 30 days. And so with that, he has to establish an acquisition regulatory council to assist in the direction and coordination of a government-wide procurement policy and a government-wide procurement policy and regulatory activities in the federal government. So let's say he is able to do it in 30 days and have all the public and have the Congress decide on how and where this is going to happen. Then he has to establish the regulatory council. And the council will consist of an administrator, secretary of defense, administrator of aeronautics and space, and the administrator of general services. And so he has to put this team together. So what I'm trying to say is, before anything like this would happen, there would be a long, drawn out sequence of events, and you would definitely know about it. So that's the first thing. The second thing, right? And so that's the boring part. So in order for the procurement of an acquisition of any kind of regulatory action to happen, there's a lot of steps that have to take into place, and it's going to be Congress is going to be intimately involved in that process. So I think, based upon everything we know, right, and we're going to get into some other reasons why this is ridiculous, if the government was going to say, hey, we're going to come in and take all these preppers' foods. Well, they would have to, number one, know who all the preppers are. Number two, they would have to totally rewrite this law, because this law does not even cover that. And number three, the regulatory body would have to somehow establish, based upon what we know about USC 4512, what is the definition of hoarding? Because as of right now, there's no definition. And people say, well, that's purposefully done to be vague. Well, in order for it to work, the governing body would have to come together, and Congress would have to come together, and they would have to decide what that is before they even started action on that. That's why it's set up that way, because it's not up to the federal law to decide what is considered to be hoarding, right? Because what is considered a reasonable demand for business, personal, or home consumption, right? The word hoarding in this has no definition, and that's because what's considered hoarding now may not be considered hoarding 20 years from now. So the whole purpose of leaving that the way it is it allows Congress and it allows the regulatory body to make those decisions. But I can tell you, based upon what we do know, right, what would constitute hoarding? I can tell you in my state, I can, without a commercial license, I can harvest and sell 2,000 chicken a year. And that's just without a license. That's just as a small operation. My state has deemed it okay to dispatch and harvest and sell 2,000 chickens without a business license. And that's just for chickens, right? So if the government were to come in and say, well, we have a bunch of chicken farmers in Oregon that are, they're selling, they have 2,000 chickens. Well, how can that be considered hoarding when the state has designated that, 2,000 chickens can be harvested without a business license? And if I get more, well, then I guess I have to pay for a business license. And if I did, then, my operation can be how big then, right? What constitutes hoarding in that respect? And 2,000 chickens is a lot of chicken. That's more than my family can eat, right? And that's just for chicken. So that's just one example. What would be considered hoarding, right? You would have to make it somewhere way above 2,000 for it to be considered hoarding, because, like I said, the state freely operates that, you need no license to be able to harvest 2,000. And that's just chickens. That's not including, waterfowl. That's not including, sheep, cattle, all that other stuff. So that's something else to think about too. So when we're thinking about this, so that definition would come whenever Congress convenes, right? So that's number one. Number two, this federal law is designated to talk about COVID-19, which under the COVID-19 disaster recovery bill, it would go against policy to go into people's homes and take food that's not been certified or has not been deemed good, right? And then redistribute that to other people. It's a COVID-19 bill, right? I mean, in my state, let's talk about my state again. I can't even donate food to the food bank. I can donate money, but because of COVID laws and restrictions that has been placed upon them by the federal government, they can't accept food from the normal everyday person because of COVID concerns. So this idea that you're somehow going to be able to take a COVID bill that has the ultimate, has the ultimate priority on keeping things apart, that would go contraindicated to the goal of the spread of COVID-19. If you want to spread a virus or spread anything, grab people, go door to door, grab people's food, put it all in one place, and then redistribute it. Right? Because like I said, this is a COVID bill. So people are obviously taking this bill and they're trying to make it into something that it's not. Right? So for food, for example, can the government say that there's a food scarcity issue? They already are saying that in a lot of places. But does that mean that they are going to come door to door and take your food and redistribute it? No, because it goes against every health policy that the federal government has. If you really believe that this is a federal law and it's going to somehow, and you're taking the federal law for what it is, well, then take all the other federal laws that would restrict the government's ability to come in, take and mismatch food that is unvetted and uncertified and redistribute it. So if you're gonna say one federal law is the end all be all, then what about all these other federal laws that would prohibit anybody from taking food and mix and mashing it without any kind of credentialing, right? So flat out, there are so many discrepancies with the idea that this would allow government to go door to door, right? And that's not even taking the fact that we don't even have the resources. The government doesn't have the resources available to, go door to door and confiscate your food. Like, what are you expecting to happen? A bunch of Army National Guard soldiers that can barely pass their, height and weight standards, barely pass a rifle qual, are going to go door to door, stack on a house, and take your kid's cereal? Like, come on. Next thing, firearms, right? After Eddie Compass did his little stupid shenanigans there in New Orleans, federal government came out with the Disaster Recovery Personal Protection Act. And this basically states and is a, federal law. You can find it U.S. Code 5207. That's U.S. Code 5207 and 5207, which basically states that no person from government, no government employee can come and take your firearms in a natural disaster. It's clearly there. It's clearly there. So the idea, right, that is an actual legit law, right? They can't come in and they can't seize your firearms, even under the guise of a national emergency. They can't do it. Read it for yourself. In fact, let me pause right here and put it on the screen for you. Perfect. It's on the screen there. Please look it up for yourself. Make sure that you read it in its entirety. So, like I said, that is a legit federal law. So the idea, like again, these Army National Guardsmen that can barely pass height and weight standards, barely pass rifle quals, have very low, readiness altogether, are somehow going to grab enough guys and they're going to go door to door, kick your door in, take your kid's cereal, but leave the firearms and ammunition. I mean, is that really what we think is going to be happening? That's what I thought. So like I said, I understand what happens, right? People will take this, they'll take that one-liner from the top there off 4512, USC 4512, and they will put it out there and say, see, hoarding of scarce materials, the government can come in and take them from you. And they take that one sentence and they don't put any kind of background. They put no nuance behind it. And I get it. People are very distrusting of, right now, any kind of authority, anybody that claims to be an authority on anything. That's fine. I get that. But it's important that we look at this from a realistic standpoint and not from a fear porn standpoint. I mean, trust me, I could easily get 10 times as many views, actually 100 times as many views, if I just took bits and pieces and just made this thing seem like it was crazy and it was happening tomorrow. Like, I'm sure I could get, I mean, I know I could get tons of views on that and be like, it's possible, right? And just, what if, and I could do all that bullshit, but that doesn't help anybody, because it's so far from the pale and so far from reality that, I ethically could not do that to you guys. But there are many channels out there that have no problem scaring you. So, like I said, let's think about this realistically, okay? Number one, it's a COVID-19 bill that has everything to do with making sure that COVID-19 standards that have already been put in place or go into effect. They're there to support that mission, right? So that would be contraindicated to go in, take people's food that's been unvetted, and then redistribute it. That would make the spread worse. Okay, so it's a COVID-19 bill, guys. Keep that in mind. Number two, this is referring to medical supplies, disinfectant, and PPE, which it specifies in the bottom of that bill. So take a look for it for yourself. Number three, yes, the verbiage is very broad. And the purpose of that is because in order to get anything going, it has to go to Congress. It has to be discussed in Congress. And then 60 days later, unless there's a really good reason for it to be 30 days later, they're going to establish an acquisition regulatory council to assist and direct, which means that definition will then be made very clear. We've already seen with current statutes and we've already seen with current law that what's considered for personal consumption, especially when it comes to food, is a lot. Like I said, just 2,000 chickens alone, not needing a business license. You know what I mean? So, and that's not even the biggest kicker yet. The biggest kicker is we already have a federal law that would prevent people, the government, from taking your firearms in case of a national emergency. So like I said, is the idea really that the military is going to come in, kick down your door, take your kid's cereal, leave your firearms? I mean, this honest question, and please answer it in the comment section below for me. So I get it, people love your porn, people want to be entertained. There is nothing cooler than for some of these preppers to feel like they are so important that the government wants to take their shit. I get it. Some of you guys get off from that. Cool. Do you, boo-boo. But the reality of the situation is, people are taking a snippet of this COVID law and they're conflating it to something that it isn't. So I get it. People are scared. People are worried. If you are scared and worried, there is a more efficient way to find the answers than to rattle online and freak yourself and everybody else out. They're actually efficient measures. Like, number one, actually knowing and understanding the law. And number two, realizing there are already laws in place to keep confiscation from happening here. So keep that in mind. Like I said, I know it's going to hurt a lot of people's feelings, but hey man, I'm here to give you the truth. I'm not here to scare you. I'm not here to profit off of you. I'm not here to tell you I can't say certain things, so go to my Patreon account. I'm not here to sell you merch. I'm here to give you the truth. So that's what it is. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. If you guys totally disagree with what I'm saying, leave me a thumbs down. Leave a comment in the comment section below, and let's talk about it. As always, guys, long live the Republic.